They have put boards up in the banqueting and music rooms to protect the wallpaper and taken down the curtains. It's much more practical, I suppose, but I do miss the fantastical dragons and those life-sized Chinese figures who looked as if they were going for a moonlit walk across the walls. The kitchen has become an operating theatre. Not, it seems, that I'll have much to do with that. When we reported for duty, Colonel MacLeod, our commanding officer, said that all medical treatment is to be carried out by British doctors and surgeons from the Indian Medical Service, assisted by some Indian doctors and a few Indian medical students who were studying here when the war began. He didn't mention the Queen's nurses. After a while, I could contain myself no longer and put up my hand to ask. The Colonel frowned and said that it had been decided that no nursing was to be carried out by English women. I waited for him to explain why not, but he simply nodded, as if that settled it. I was not bold enough to ask again, but while he went on speaking of hospital protocol, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and so afterwards I followed him to his office. I told him that I was terribly sorry, but that I didn't understand what he had said, since nursing was, after all, what we have been trained to do. He looked at me from under his great white eyebrows and said that it would be improper. When I asked why, he harumphed a bit and then said that I must understand that India is one of our colonies and therefore its subjects are under our command. I said I didn't know how that changed things, at which point he harumphed again and said that in India, English women never nursed the native population, because it wouldn't do to be so intimately involved, and so the Queen's nurses would act in a supervisory capacity only, working with the orderlies to maintain the highest standards. He then said very firmly that if I was not happy with this state of affairs, he would rather I told him now before the patients arrived. No, I am happy, I said. It wasn't true, of course. I left quickly, feeling rather cross. It really is a bit of a blow. I cannot see what would be so improper about it. As Papa always says, we are all the same on an operating table. If it weren't for Robert, I would be tempted to go off to one of the other hospitals, where I could be properly useful. But I do so want to learn about his world. And so I have decided to bite my lip and make the best of it. This morning, I went up to the station to collect our patients from the hospital train. It was a dreary day, with rain streaming down since dawn, the streets all churned up with mud, and I felt sorry that this would be their first impression of the place, although, I suppose for those poor men, anything would be better than where they have just come from. A crowd of well-wishers huddled under umbrellas outside the station entrance. When the first stretcher-bearers emerged, there was a moment of silence, unplanned, but observed by everyone, a mark of respect for the soldiers' bravery and for what they have suffered. Then came cheers and applause, which I was pleased about, because they are such a long way from home, and it is so terribly important to make them feel welcome. The men were in an awful state. More than half of them had to be carried on stretchers, the others limping along on crutches, or staggering with their arms around their comrades. They looked exhausted, as if they were at the end of a very long journey, which of course was the case. An interminable voyage across the Indian Ocean, then up to fight in the trenches in northern France, out again, once wounded, to the field hospitals, and then put on a train, and then a boat to cross the Channel, then another train to Brighton, right at the end of the line. It was an odd sight. They looked so very, foreign. Before today, the only Indian I had ever seen was Mowgli in the picture book I had as a girl. But here were a good 24 of them, slowly making their way along the wind-swept platform. The first thing I noticed were lots of rather grand moustaches and beards, long and black, and dark eyes under neatly wound turbans. Some of the men were very tall and elegant in the way that they held themselves, despite